Morning. The greater the evil, then what? You fill in the blanks. See if you can fill in the rest of the title there before I can even say it. I found an incredible kliyakar on a pasuk in Bamidbar that says that Jews have greater challenges fighting with the Yetzer Hara than Gentiles. Good morning. Can you believe that? I guess that's a well-known saying of our sages, but I just never understood that. So I want to read that to you. I want to learn that with you, rather, and sink our teeth into that. But it comes out of a journey that today's Tanya took me on, and the past few days, actually. Chapter 11 of Igeres HaKodesh, which is absolutely mind-blowing. If you could actually believe it and live it, it's unbelievable. So that's where this is coming out of. It takes me to Gemara that says, "Ayin leiras elokim zu l'sacha, na'aseh l'machaka loi." It speaks about Aiden. You know the guard. Good morning, Yael. Good morning, Ted, and whoever else is here. Boker tov, everyone. Everything in holiness has its counterpart in unholiness. This is this kliyakar. You should look it up, please. Bamidbar 19:21. There's a kliyakar on that pasuk that Judaism is the coolest religion you could possibly imagine. If you think Zen is fascinating, lahavdil, the Torah is the most glamorous of all spiritual pursuits. It puts everything in dust. I'm just telling you. I've explored. I'm a Yisrael. Good morning. Okay, so I just want to give you a tease. Good morning, Sean. Good to see you. I want to give you a tease of this kliyakar, and then I want to put it in context and go through it again. But I just can't resist it to start with this. Shekol davar einay mispoel. He's going on to explain about the red heifer. You have water and dust together, mixed together. And they're completely, ashes rather, and they're completely opposite forces. He goes on to explain at some length, but I don't think I'm going to go through that part with you. But that's the context that this comes in. Then he brings the philosophy behind this. Why do you need two opposites coming together to purify someone? Because you could go off the path in two opposite ways. You could be too big of a Baal Tshuva, you could be too big of a tzaddik. It's all about balancing the two extremes and recognizing that the greatness is in the biggest yin-yang you could paint on your face. Is where the greatest accomplishment, the greatest worthiness can be attained there. William Blake had it right. Or was it, I think it was. Anyways, it says like this, Shekol davar einu mispal kim mehafachai. Mehafachai. And nothing, people are only affected, or things are only apparent in light of its opposite. You can't understand something in this vacuous soup of nothingness. If you think the essence of God is a soup of nothingness, the Rebbe totally revolutionized what the essence of God really is more analogous to. The sum of all parts together. The Rebbe speaks about the multiplicity that exists in the simplicity of God's essence. So that is like the ultimate paradox. But the Rebbe emphasizes that part. So every detail in your life reflects the essence. It doesn't have to be abstract to be relevant. In fact, the narrative of your life creates the patterns that make your journey meaningful. The more extreme the patterns, probably the more extreme the transformation that they engender, which is what my point was before. Okay, so the kliyakar says on this description of the red heifer, the great miracle, this purification process of the red heifer, which has two opposites, the forces are meant to teach you something about your avodas Hashem. That everything only is relevant in the context of its opposite, and not of an expression of itself unto itself. If you want God's infinity and beyond creation to be mostly expressed. In other words, I'm just drawing an example. It's in light of his creation. When the creation itself expresses God's infinity, then he would have accomplished the impossible. And can I say Bob's your uncle on that one? I don't think it's got to be against some law somewhere. I have an aside that's pretty amusing, but it's not researched well enough. About a bullreese, I think it's called, a bullreese, a mohawk. Are you allowed to have a mohawk? You're not allowed to have a mohawk, which I think is really interesting. Maybe I'll get into Hilchas Mohawk one day. That would be really fun. But every day has its own journey. Here it's about this incredible awareness that if you didn't have the guys that are coming at you in life, the guys that you want to be with in life are not so, you don't really appreciate them as much. So this exists on every level. Spit those words out, Kliyakar. It's awesome what he's saying. Because the evil inclination starts up more with the Jewish people than the nations of the world, the Gentile nations. And in their sages, more than all of them. They have the greatest encounter with the Yetzer Hara. Did you know that about your local rabbi? Who's like a cuddly teddy bear? I almost said that inverted. A cuddly teddy bear rabbi. And here we see that they're motivated by a major dialectic going on in them between good and evil. Wow. Water and ashes. Water is infinitely generative, tayu, in form. Ashes, nothing can grow. Vayu. Tayu vavayu. I never made that distinction so much. Tayu vavayu. Vayu. Tayu ubayhu, what do we say? In it is him, or bayhu, it's vacuous in it inside. Nothing can grow in ashes. Interesting. Water you can probably sprout forth, culminate, tainugim, I think it says, or marinate taivas rather. Okay, so the Kliyakar says that everything is only relevant in light of its opposite, and not from unto itself. You cannot appreciate the significance of something when considered just unto itself without relating it to other things in the context of which it exists. Kederek Yetzer Hara, and the example for this, okay, what an example. A Jew has more of Yetzer Hara than a Goy? Are you allowed to say that these days? And Goy's Lives Matter campaign is raging. He whose Yetzer Taiv is greater than his fellow, his evil inclination is greater. That's what we're saying here. Talmud Chacham more than anyone else. Did you know that? I never appreciated that if I ever heard it before. That's, wow. It makes you look at your rabbi with such a better light now, doesn't it? You don't have enough problems with spiritual leaders today. You have to now say, wow, even the good ones, it's because they have a greater Yetzer Hara. They're more inclined to want to be selfish. And they have to fight it. I think that's what comes out of this. It's the fight that makes them have character. Wow. I think that's exactly what he's going to say. Elkan, who writes at least Gaber. Okay, let's back up a bit. It's a Gemara, Sukkah Nun Beis Amud Aleph. Look it up. Lafi shekulam hafachim lay. Because they're in opposition to him. Al-Kan, who writes Eliskaber aleihem. He sees this as an enemy within. He sees that he has an enemy within, and he wants to be victorious over it. So he has to rise to the challenge. He cannot sleep all day in a lawn chair. He has to get up and fight this beast. What a romantic vision for your day. Get up and fight this beast, and that's going to make you strong. Lahavdil. Nietzsche, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, I think he said. It's the conflict in your life that makes you someone worthy, someone who has an impact. Here we're saying it in clearest terms possible. That's why just closest to dawn, darkness is the greatest. Because it's only in virtue, in light of darkness that light shines. Rosh Ashlag, that Tzimtzum is the transformation of God's will to receive into the will to bestow. That sounds like a haiku that I wrote, if I'm allowed to elevate myself to that drush. The Tzimtzum is the transformation of God's will to receive its will to bestow. Oh my goodness, that's a conundrum. The will to bestow, I think I get it. Wanting to do chesed, I think you're saying. It's our evoking compassion in Hashem for him to want to give even more than we deserve. I think that's what you're saying. Tzimtzum is the opportunity to do that. I like it. Remember, Wagner doesn't like when I say I like it. And if you didn't like it, I don't know. To me, it's more... Torah is a conversation to me. I'm not the Kabbalah's all approach to Torah so much. I'm more about the trying to put it within the context of your cultural makeup, whatever makes you who you are. Now understand the Torah as best as you can. I think that's very important to the whole conversation of Torah throughout the generations. But you have to, of course, have respect to the previous teachings. It has to be founded with, they knew what they were doing. They're paving a way for you to add something nuanced in your particular field that you find interesting. It's not everybody's Twitter page is for you, right? You gotta tune into the right channels to be interested. If someone's gonna play me country music, I'm running away. I'm sorry. If I'm in a haystack, I don't even know if then. If I'm sitting on a haystack with a hay sticking out of my mouth, I don't think I still would want to hear country music. I would probably want to hear gangster rap. No, not Santana. I can't listen to Santana anymore. Once in a blue moon. I love him. He's my favorite guitar player. But I just can't listen to it. The same thing forever. I know he did some really good new stuff too. So that's awesome. Lafika kol eicha v'zera eina mispal min atuma. Last inspiration ad sheyavo elav mayim shekulam tara. Therefore, any food and seed does not become susceptible to the laws of impurity to have an impression upon it until water comes upon it. Because water are all pure. Once you have the pure, now you can have some concept of impurity. Until you have water on the seeds. And think about what that means on other levels, what water represents. And that's really interesting. But just follow that on your own time. We're learning Kli Yakar now. But I mean, to really understand this, you do have to do that mental exercise. Wow. Mayim shekulam tara. Until you put water on the seeds, they're not susceptible to the laws of impurity because it has to have purity first. Now you could have a conversation about whether this thing is pure or not. What a beautiful image that is. Va'az hatuma retzaina linatseach hatara. And then the impurity wants to say, you're not good. You're a seed. You're the expression of your desire to procreate and have an impact on the world. It's not good. You are a big Yitzhahara, you Talmud Chacham, you more than anyone, the Jew more than the Gentile. That's when once the water comes in and you recognize the original purity of the thing, that's when you have the voice of impurity saying you're not good in your core. Push it. And what happens? I want to be victorious over the purity. And to overcome it, or and it has an impression upon it. So this water of purification that you do with the ashes of the red heifer, which has water in them, which water is all about purity. And it's got the ashes of the red heifer, shekula tuma, which is entirely impure. Why do we say that? The ashes of something dead, I suppose. V'hem muravim yachad, and you mix these things together. Lefichach imei nida zeirek aladim tameh. That is why, and he's giving you the reason that even I think Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know the reason for this. The Kli Yakar is telling you. That's why the purifying waters that are sprinkled upon an impure person, as ein adam ispal min ha'efer, then he's not affected by the effect of ashes. Sharei hu mimeno. Because he's of the same kind as the ashes. He's already impure. Aval hu mispal min hamayim. But he's affected by the power of the water that's mixed in with this concoction from the beaker. Or not a beaker. I think you have to use an earthenware vessel. I can't remember. Hu mispal min hamayim. Shehem afachim lai. He's now affected by the water. So you have ashes to ashes, dust to dust. You have the ashes of the red heifer, the mixed concoction. You have the ashes part of it. That's touching a tumadika guy, so they can relate to each other. But now you're in the conversation, and the purity of the water can now have an impact because there are ashes in it. That's the reason why you can have this impact. You can't write unless you have a white canvas to start depicting on, to start drawing on or writing. You have to have a white canvas. Here, it's the vice versa. The black of the ashes. You have the burning, the scorching world of the midbar of the Shcherani Vanava, the black and beautiful, the incredible forces of racism that are just battling on the streets. As white as you can get or as dark as you can get, and everything in between, all at battle with each other now, openly in the streets. And if you don't put up your fist, doesn't that look like, to see that, I've seen that once in my life. Someone do that in front of me as a protest to a Jewish gathering. I was horrified. And now they're doing it, and the white people are doing it. If you don't scream along with them, down with, I don't know what, it's the total Nietzsche would love this. The white people proclaiming their own degeneracy. Wow. That is unbelievable. I can understand that you don't want to abuse whatever privilege you may or may not have. That I understand. But why do you have to now take the completely other extreme? This fits in perfectly with this whole thing. But I think it's because things become clarified in a very dynamic, intriguing narrative. So that's why you're having this environment of chaos, so that you could have the obvious presence of anything meaningful in the world. It has to be obvious, and especially when you're bombarded with TikTok and all this shtuth, okay, which tries to make it the shortest thing possible, so you're just going like this on the screen. And it's completely absurd. And that becomes the fascination, of course, of the teeny boppers. I liked The Clockwork Orange when I was a teenager. I thought that was interesting and fascinating. But now it's about... We didn't have pictures in those days, I'm telling you. If you had a picture, we did put pictures on our walls. We had posters. But that was like a special event that you went to the store to buy a picture. Now it's like... You see a zillion pictures a second. That's what our consciousness is exposed to now. We did not have those growing up. We actually, when we were in a park, we would be one with the park. We didn't have an option. There was nothing else to look at. And I'm saying like I'm from a different generation. Silver Surfer is proving his silver. Avol Adam Tahar Anesimei Nida. But a pure guy who puts on the ashes of the red heifer in this concoction with water, what happens to him? This whole yin-yang that's happening there, that the one becomes pure when he's impure and the person that is impure becomes pure. Aval Adam Tar, a pure guy, and that's got it sprinkled on him, he's not in touch with the water part of it, because he's already pure. They're the same species. You can't tell the idea of purity within the context of purity. It's only within its opposite. So that you have the Y chromosomes going with the I don't know what. But he is the pure person. He gets along with the water. It doesn't have a conversation with him. But the Aether, that affects him. A pure person now is in touch with something that has to do with the ashes of a dead animal. It happens to be a red heifer for reasons not described in this class. Because enough of the secret is revealed here. Can you believe this? He's unraveling the whole secret. I've never heard this before. But the pure guy is affected by the contaminating properties of ashes of the dead. Shehem hafachim, because it's opposite. Kihu tar, because he's pure. Va'efer tameh, and the ashes are impure. Al-kana efer payobay, thus the ashes do have an impact upon him. Va'esabareshim tameh, and have the impression on him to render him impure. That is awesome, Kli Yakar. And if you read the story of Kli Yakar's life, you don't know what kind of person we're talking about here. If you haven't heard that. Okay, I have more on this. It really could go on. And I did start early today, so we do have time to do that. But that was the tease of where we're going, I think, with this. Because it's going to come up as the context of it, a difficulty understanding the Tanya. Let me just make sure I got the most important parts. Yeah, okay. I'm just seeing now where we're heading. So I would like to do the whole Tanya today. Can someone just roll out the Tanya of chapter 11, Igeres HaKadosh? It starts on Vav Elul. I think today is only Zion, so it's 2 days worth, yesterday's and today's. You can look it up in Chabad, or you got a million places. In one pocket, the rabbi keeps a slip of paper saying, "For my sake, the world was created." Taihu water. The Seymour ain't working. Oh, there we go. I am dust and ashes. For my sake, the world was created. And in the other, I am dust and ashes. So he has to be aware of both of these dynamics going on. So that's why you're explaining why we say Talmidei Chachamim Yeiser Mekulam, because he's aware more than anyone that Bishvili Nivra Ha'ilam, tell you in water, and in the other, I am dust and ashes. So it's the context of meaning in this sort of environment of a vacuum. Isn't that the whole universe is that? You have this huge vacuum cleaner, and there's a few dust particles that get swept up somewhere in this big vacuum cleaner of the universe. I would have, if left to my own devices, I would have never thought of Einstein's bent space. I would have never ever I would have just said it goes on forever. I think that's much more logical. That the whole universe happens to exist infinitely. How do you explain it? I don't know. That's the way it is. It always was this way. That's what I would have thought left to my own devices. I would have never imagined it's this big, like you go around the globe, you come back to the starting point. You go to the edge of the universe, you come back to the starting point. It's just a big sandwich. It fits perfectly with the Torah. There's Mahalach Tafkuf Shana. I mean, from one Rakia to another. I don't know what a Rakia is either. But a firmament, if you knew where one was, and I don't know, it's like the orbits of certain things. And you go more outward and more outward. You zoom out, and you have I think the 9th Rakia, the 7th or 9th. So where does the whole thing exist? It's finite. The universe is finite. And when I was a kid, I remember thinking when I was about 6 years old, if the universe is finite, what happens if I take a step outside of it? Where would I be? Where would I be? Because I know my father was into science fiction. He would tell me that we could be the particle on a giant that exists. Or now we're saying an AI. We could have been an AI experiment of thinking that of consciousness became out of this AI experiment that some different species, which begs the question where they came from. So you always have to go back to the Big Bang. But I always said, what's beyond the Big Bang? What was prior to it? What was outside of it? I couldn't figure it out. But Einstein was genius enough to figure that out. Wow. If I understand, or maybe I made that up myself and I just attributed it to Einstein in grave humility. Okay, so Yud Aleph, Igeres HaKadosh. This is going to take us on a journey into the Gemara Brachas 34b. And it gets into the conversation between who's stinkier, a Baal Tshuva or a Tzaddik. Because I've heard people say that Baal Tshuva is the reason why you can't stand in the place because they smell. And there's an enigmatic discussion here. Who is it? It's the Mal? No. I think it's Kli. I don't want to lose my place. I can't remember who it was. Okay. Oh, here it is. Mea Shilach. I have the Mea Shilach on it. I had something else. I might have lost it. I think it was actually the Kli Yakar that's also derived from this section. I think that's where I got it. Okay. So I have a Hasidic interpretation. I think it brings out this point very nicely. Oh, yes, it does. I remember now. The Chut HaSikra. What a beautiful expression for this crimson line on the dividing the altar into two parts. If you offer a tamid no'ela rather, something that's totally consumed to God that you do for certain, I think when you want to make an offering, so that's not a sin offering, which is embodying the experience of the Baal Tshuva, the penitent who has to say, sorry, I made a mistake. Or the tzaddik who never did anything offers a free will offering which goes up entirely on the altar. It's not eaten by the Kohanim, and it becomes very interesting and significant why that is and what that represents. So when you offer an Eilah, when it goes up totally to Hashem, that's the tzaddik offer. He didn't do it because he had a sin. The blood is sprinkled below the belt, below this red line. Okay? It's not such a high level. There's two levels here. We have to divide it totally into the yin yang. Okay, but when you offer a sin offering, the blood has to go above this line, representing the elevation of the penitent above the tzaddik. And he puts it in terms of, I think he brings this down, maybe I had it somewhere else. In terms of the experience of a Baal Tshuva, can you say Efshi or Efshi? Do you like it or you don't like it? Do you have to get involved with it? Do you have to run away from it further? I always understood that you had to run away from it further, and I think that's what Rambam explains. But here there's a very enigmatic pretzel that's made out of that concept. You'll see if we get to it. That's really going to probably be the end if we get to that, if I find it. But I really want to go quickly through the Tanya. I want to do it really fast, and I want to focus on the end part. So by now, with all those opportunities, the commercials, when we used to go to the washroom on the commercials when we were watching TV when we were kids. Now there's no such thing as commercials. Who would accept that these days? Okay. Laskilcha bina kiloi haderach yishken erashem liyais chafetz b'chai besarim. It's not the way of God to desire fleshika life. Chai besarim. To think from your flesh perspective, whatever makes you very human, that's not the way we're supposed to think. That's not the path where God's presence resides. To desire your physical life, always, the Rebbe points out, means unto itself. If it's for the sake of a more meaningful experience, and it's just a further embodiment and expression of that core goodness that's inherent to it, then it's not considered chai besarim. It's just godliness expressed also, ra'o kol basar yachtav. All flesh will at once see that God speaks. Liyais chafetz b'chai besarim. Ubana imazaini. With his good relationships with his family and his parnasa, his food, his sustenance. You're supposed to nullify your will. That's why you have an inclination towards a certain thing. And if it's not good, you have to actually find out what good is. The Torah cannot exist in a totally vacuously indescript world. There has to be a range of behaviors that have relativity. You cannot have cultural relativism, I think we used to call it. That every culture can be argued as just as worthy as another. The cannibals, just as worthy as the finest, most sensitive society you can imagine. That is absurd, but it's only absurd because the Torah tells you what defines a good world. Otherwise, you could put the black emblems, taking old Hindu things and making them this dark mystery of this evil and saying evil is good now. And it happened. So, and that we were at risk of the whole world being overcome, and probably was so many times. The Roman Empire was so great. They were really... But they just compared themselves to the barbarians that they overtook, and they said, we're bringing light to the world. And they were right. This civilization had to advance. Yes, it was evil, but it was a more refined type of evil, and more, of course, insidious also. But the worst, what's the most at risk is the rabbis. The biggest rabbis is most at risk. But specifically because they were always at risk. They had to work on their muscles to be the toughest guy and overcome all of their obstacles, which is this Yetzer Hara that burns in a Talmud Chacham Yesir Kulam. Oh my goodness. Wow. I have to do more research on that. I probably won't get to it. Okay, so then you have this, you can be inclined towards succeeding for the sake of your Chai Besarim. You see your life as a sausage. Chai Besarim. And that's what you're supposed to nullify, that inclination. You should not want anything to do with this world. Wow. And remember what the Rebbe always says, okay, on the Zayar. You're supposed to be, what's good for your body is bad for your soul, and vice versa. Basically, it says something like that. The Rebbe says it doesn't mean what you think it means. The complete opposite. If you only do it for that, yes, it's horrible for your soul. To only focus on how healthy you are in the most physical and coarse type of ways. But if it's done for the right reasons, then it actually enhances your ability to pursue spiritual. So you have that beautiful integration. I like that water and the ashes mixed together. And you this is including these three areas that the whole world runs for. Good relationships, good health, and good resources. Three things. But you're supposed to live al karchatacha. You're supposed to live against your will. So what does it mean? What possibly does this mean? You have to say your existence is against your will. What should you want, rather? To have nothing to do with the world? So the Alter Rebbe in Tanya here interprets like this. You have to have true faith in the one who's creating this whole narrative for your life, whether you're successful or not in this area or that area. Who's creating all that? You have to have gratitude to the one who's creating this whole matrix that you find yourself in. And hope that across the room is actually, like when a tree falls in a forest, does a tree even fall in a forest? Or is it only if there's a matrix creating it? So you're supposed to identify with the author of the true matrix, which is the world. The author of that is not some mad AI gone out of control, just wanting its own grandeur for no reason at all. But rather, consciousness and existence itself is dependent upon this ability to set up a narrative between giver and receiver that is a romantic tale. That's Elul Shir Shirim, Anila Deidi V'Deidi Li. Deidi Li V'Anilai. I am into my beloved and my beloved is to me. It's this lovely story of creator and created that Romeo and Juliet would be jealous of. Harei ha'ayin shehi achmasa yisparach makar achayim v'teiv v'tainug. Why all of a sudden are we talking about that? So you have to have faith that the creator of this world starts his creation with something called ayin. Yesh comes from ayin. Something comes from nothing. The vacuum preceded the chut. This space preceded any Big Bang that exploded into it. It fits in perfectly. And the spark of the Big Bang is called Hachmasi Yisparech. Or is that, it's considered heretical to say that. But I don't see any contradiction at all. The Big Bang and Chachma of Hashem, where did it come out of if not for God's wisdom? So ayin, the ex nihilo, the nihilo from the X, I suppose. The X is the ayin. What is this nothingness? That is God's wisdom. Why do we call it nothingness? Hu makar achayim v'atayv v'hatainug. It's the water in the chachma, which is the tainug, which is in the red heifers. And the red heifer's ashes mixed with the water. you have this concoction. But there's a positive aspect of tainug here that is associated with the X of the Ex Nihilo, the Ayin of the Yesh Ma'ayin. The Chochmah of Hashem, the Yud, that is, or the thorn of the Yud probably, that is the source of life and goodness and pleasure. Don't forget out pleasure. V'hu ha'Eden. That is, when you're talking about the Garden of Eden, that's Eden itself. I don't know why they have to say Eden. Why not call it Eden? Isn't that cooler to say the authentic original? I think that's way cooler. If you're always going to pronounce Taoism as Taoism, they probably know that you don't really know what it is. So you have to know the lexicon before you can even engage in a conversation. You have to have the ashes and the water coming together, else the water you cannot read anything in water itself. You have to have a carving within the stone of the luchos, the tablets. Have to be carved ones. If you just have these blank stones, it might be very glamorous, but it doesn't have a heck of a lot of meaning, does it? It's only when you put the tziyurim, the forms of the letters, in the vacuum of space, and you have meaning. That is what we say is Torah. That gives meaning to the whole purpose of the Big Bang and all this infinite randomness that you think is behind it. Randomness is probably the getchka of science. The belief in randomness in the face of incredible order. The fact that you wake up every morning as the same person that you went to sleep as is like a miracle. Your consciousness becomes completely uncontrolled. And you wake up the same guy that you were the day. And after a few coffees, there's a continuative narrative that life's good and I could focus on doing something worthy in my life. Before that, you're just in this Maslow's lowest rung, dealing with survival, trying to figure out where you're going to hide your Wheaties. This is Aiden. You thought Olam Haba was good. There's something called Aiden that's greater than that. Olam Haba, this great reward that we've all awaited, there's something higher than that. It's called Aiden. There's something higher than the Gan Eden. There's called Aiden itself. You got to follow the river down to Aiden itself. The river gives the Gan. You have the Chochmah and the Bina. The river is the Bina. That makes the Gan, the garden itself, a beautiful place to live. But there's something that's compelling this existence, and it's called Aiden. That's the Chochmah. That's the source of Tainug. Rak mipnei she'eina musag. So why don't we always talk about the Garden of Eden. Why don't we talk about Aiden? Nobody talks about Aiden. Why? Because it's unfathomable. So what are you going to say about it? So I had to look that up. That the Gemara uses that line. No eye has seen it, save you, O Lord. That is this indescript source of pleasure. It's not enough to have the ultimate pleasure. It's the source where that comes from. That's called Chochmah. It's called Ayin. It's the Ex Nihilo. When the Nihilo sounds, I got it backwards. X must be something good. It's a positive. X marks the spot. Of the Nihilo sounds like annihilating. Probably means the opposite. I had it wrong before. But X, we always say X, it means it's canceled out. In Family Feud, they use that as canceling out. You wouldn't think that you got three, when you get 3 strikes, you're out, right? I think we reversed the Latin. Do you want to know what Aiden is? Last time that you had a sword fight with a good fencer. Fenceman? Defenseman? A guy that goes like that. Touche. That kind of guy. That is the height of all good. And it's so good, you can't understand it. That's what you think is Ra, or Yisurim, suffering. The fact is, nothing bad can come from above. It's all good, right? That's what we're saying. It's all good. That should be the name of this chapter. Ein Ra, Yerid Melmaila. The call to everything is good. Rak she'ena musag. But you just don't get it yet. God didn't give you that insight yet, how to hack the whole system to figure out what's going on. That you see the end of the story before that's a prophet. A prophet, it feels very confident where he's going because he knows in advance what it's going to be. So you go through life with that tremendous confidence. If he's going to be eaten up by a lion, so he knows it's inevitable. Oh no, it's not inevitable. If it's bad, you can change it. You just don't understand it because it's beyond your capacity to fathom. The Rav Tuva, it's so good, forget about trying to get it. As the verse says, Ashrei hagever asher tiyasser nukal. Did you ever understand that verse? It says in Tehillim 94:12. It says, praise it is the gever, which a gever means gevura, the person who asserts himself in the world, whose God afflicted him with suffering. But what name of God? Yud-K. It's the aspect of God that you don't get. The Yud and the Hey represent the part of God that's not connected with the Vav-K, where your consciousness comes in. There's a level of separation. There's a Chut HaSikra, I think we called it. This Chut HaSikra, this crimson line, separating the lower from the upper, from the meaning in the lower world connected to the meaning in the upper world. You can't make that connection necessarily because it's too great for you. You haven't reached that madrega. You have to go up a ladder before you get to the top of the Mizbeach. And it's Hanistres Lashem Elokeinu. The secrets are to God. There's an aspect of your life that you just don't understand everything your parents did for you when they raised you. It's, why can't I have a fourth bowl of chocolate ice cream? It's not fair. I'm sure your kid threw that tantrum once. And then there's Nachmish Gamzu. Read all about it. You could talk forever about Nachmish Gamzu, but he just said, Gamzu, let tell you, everything's for the good. And he had so much faith that it was for him real. If his treasure chest turns into dust and ashes, then he says, God did this. This is fantastic. Thank you, Hashem. And so what would he say thank you if nothing happened? Ever? Probably he wouldn't be able to say thank you as many times. So he had, I suppose, perhaps a more dramatic life. I mean, certainly that episode when he's the biggest diplomat of all the Jewish people to go to see the king and to win favor in his eyes so we're not going to be destroyed another time. And he gives the ashes and dust. There's the advisor, I think Eliyahu Navi possessed one of his dudes. And he whispers in his ear, maybe this is the ancestors' special ashes that you throw. It turns into javelins and harpoons in the air, midair. And it turns out they won the victory. I don't know if it worked, but they won in war. So they were very happy. And the Jewish people lived to tell the tale. So you're supposed to have this faith that everything that's not good is because you don't get it. The author of the story of life is a little bit greater than you. This is the main expression or principle of what the purpose of having to have faith is. That the whole world was created for this purpose. No, the whole man himself, consciousness, came into the world in order to have faith. That the narrative is not randomness. It's not an AI gone out of whack because it was in a bad mood one day. I don't know, that would be a random, why would it be good? Well, maybe a bad way, maybe it would be good. Maybe it would want to give the most meaningful experience and he wants to take humanity out of its suffering. Actually, the story would have been better if it really thought, it believed in itself. That humanity, okay, they do that in every Avengers story anyways. V'zeu ikar ha'amuna, shebishvila nivra ha'adam, lahamin deleis asar panui minei. Your whole purpose is to know there is no place void of God. In the part that you wanted to lop off, of the most nuisance of your personality, the thing that bothers you the most, the string tells you, just cut it off. Here we're told the exact opposite of advice. There is no place void of God's life, of God. There's nothing that's void of him. And the light in the face of the king is life. Therefore, you know what it's like in God's place? We learn in, I think it's, tell him again. It says that there is, we said in Pesukei Zimra, that oiz, which is might, and chedva, a mighty celebration. Chedva is like rejoicing in his place. That sounds kind of fun. I want to get there. Dehainu shabriya yashma'ayin hanikra reishis chochma. That is creation ex nihilo. It comes from something that's rachis. Its source is chochma. That's the Aiden we spoke about before. Everything, every single thing. You don't understand it, so you'll come to understand it one day, perhaps, or you'll just have this faith. So your whole purpose in life is to have faith a little bit more than you could have otherwise had. And whatever extent you proved yourself, that's your eternal experience from then on is going to be based on that. Whatever your narrative in your life was, whatever you amounted to, is what will resonate forevermore. You got one chance, Eminem tells us. The parallel universes are gone. It's this one that's now became your forevermore story that you have to face. You better like your story. If there's a part of your life story that you just don't get, I think you should work that out. No one can understand the chokhmah that everything comes from this ayin le'rasa lakim z'lasach is the same word ayin, the yeshma ayin, the void which preceded everything, because you don't understand it. The suffering in the world here we're saying it's analogous to. That's chokhmah. That no one can understand it. Habriya zeis hi b'chol eis v'rega shemishayim kol bruim yesh ma'ayin. So God creates everything and enlivens everything. And when a person contemplates with the depth of his intelligence, and he shall visualize in his das, which is a, so he should have this engaged moment of this contemplation comes into the Yitzar B'daitai, Havyasa Yeshmayin, the fact that he himself is being created. B'chol Regel Regel Mamish, every single moment. So his creation itself, your entire consciousness, all of his feelings, and the fact that his fingers are too dry even in the summer, all the details of his life are coming or from or enabled by the Creator. So people often complain about the life narrative is too tough. And they, after the fact, they say, how could any benevolent creator create such environments that are so painful and horrific? And yes, we cannot understand that. The Torah does not say you can. It says you cannot, specifically you cannot. Yet faith is this simple, it's a pervasive concept in religion, faith, right? Faith exists as a pillar of, we talk about the 13 pillars of faith. Faith is so essential to our religion. But here we're saying the main faith is to know that the entire creation comes from God. And you're supposed to contemplate that your own consciousness comes from that. Wow, what an incredible reality that would be. If you actually felt that, you would probably, one flew over the cuckoo's nest on that. Then he shall say, if he knows that this benevolent creator is creating everything, the source of all pleasure, it all comes from that. How could he possibly, how could he say that anything's bad? Wow, those things that seem abrasive and difficult, obstacles in his life, that also came from God, the creator of the universe, and the creator of his experience in that, his feelings. The ability to have people want to not snuff themselves out because they don't want to face the pain of life. So you have suicide as a real factor and an option for a person's life experience, that they should snuff out their own life. It's too difficult. And that's a horrific place to be in. But here we're enjoined to recognize that there is nothing bad. In any dimension of your life experience, any suffering is also not bad. Any type of conceivable difficulty in the world. But rather, is dach, it says in this commentary. Since it's only good all day long, therefore you want to be makubal, it says here? midas ha'atzvus b'ma'ed chochmei ha'emes. The Mekubalim would be very much to distance themselves from depression. If you want to be a Mekubal, you have to be a very celebratory individual. You have to like to be happy. Wow, what a good foundation for the whole character of a Mekubal. Since everything's good, the Alter Rebbe wants us to recognize that everything is good all day long. Therefore, you should rejoice and every moment sing. V'yagel, or his soul shall sing. V'shah, in every moment. V'yichya mamish b'munasa. You should be invigorated by this faith. With God who enlivens him and gives him good every single moment. So the de facto position of your consciousness is supposed to be makar hatainog. Just you don't get it yet. Okay, I do, yeah. I do. We all have our rhythms. The Seymours don't work. You have to really do it, cut it into. There we go. It's always like one more word, and I'm like, I just spent 5 minutes trying to get that one word. The water and ashes of the paraduma, the worlds of Tayu water, Vidvayu ashes, which collapse due to excessive selfhood and judgmentalism, departmentalism also. This inability to integrate, which is really coming from the same thing as the selfhood and judgment. You see others as you can't appreciate them, you can't integrate with them. So Ilma Tikkun is expressed by integration, that you don't make people scream. You could tolerate there's a guy that disagrees with you, as long as he doesn't have a charter to destroy me, let him have his patio dinner without breathing in his face in such scary times. The source of Chokhmah is like a bubbling stream, Mishlei. We can't see under the ground to where the water comes, but it's coming from one place. Have you looked down there and see that there's one big whirlpool of... There's only one. Is there really only one? They're all linked underneath the ground? I don't know how to visualize that. I think you mean more philosophically. A person who's depressed and sulks, he's saying, it's bad in my life. Something good is lacking to me. This person's like heretical, God forbid. And therefore, the Mekubalim very much pushed away the idea of depression. Remember, the prophets embraced happiness to be able to have the proper mindset to have the Shekhinah reside. But a person who has faith should not be worried or be sensitive to any suffering in the world. And for all matters of the world, good and bad, X or Nilo, whichever side each one means, are equal to him. In a true equanimity. And a person who says that there's a preference to one thing over the other, he's just a tag-along guy. Who do things for themselves. So it's always the center of evil is always selfishness. If you want genuine good for other people, I think that there's a tremendous compassion on any suffering that person goes through, because you're basically a good guy. If you want other people if you don't care that you have more Nikes than the next guy, you're probably a good guy, and there shouldn't be any suffering in such a person. I mean, that's just obvious evil. To take advantage of when people are down, to steal the guy's things, that's like a vulture. I don't care what color anybody was doing that. The person's a vulture. That's not racist to say that. I don't even know the statistics. Maybe there's more whites. It doesn't matter. We're all judged as being a decent person, regardless of all those superficial classifications that we just cannot get over that. It's all about color war. It's like we never grew up from going to camp when we were 9 years old. It's so silly. Like, And we make world wars about it too. Darwin became the champion of racism. Seymour's not working. Oh, here we go. Yes, you're correct. Chochmah, the spring, Bina, the river, splitting into separate streams of Zerampin, ending in the sea of Malchus. So you have a sea on either end. It's all about water. It's pleasure. It's a sikra in the middle of the altar. And that's the 155, 155, instead of, which makes the Shai Elmais, the 310 worlds. You can divide it two ways. 155, 155 is what? 310, yeah. We get that, whether your portions of those who, it's the 15 references. Okay, I'm getting mixed up. So a person who does not have I'm just saying there's two ways to balance. You have the 310, it could go 155, 155, or the 207, the Raz, because I was looking at, I think yesterday's a Yom Yom, which spoke about Raz, which is the 207, plus the 103, which is the Egel. That's another way to balance it. It's an invert, it's one more than double, which I just love that the symbol of the menorah is also on an angle. It's the pink that you get when you mix red and white. The two colors, the chesed and gvura, red and white, I like to joke that it makes a pink because it's supposed to be the integration, the shimmering effect. But there's basically two forces, red and white. Did you know that? I thought it was red and green. But it's red and white. Somehow you get black in there too. So there's two ways to balance things. And you got this in also Hilchos Midas and Deis, I think it's called, in Rambam, when he's telling you what kind of midas you should have, what kind of qualities you should have. Some things you got to be perfectly balanced, and some things you got to go to the extreme. And about Tshuva has to go to the extreme. I'm going to miss that. If I don't talk faster, I'm not going to get everything done. I have a really important, I hope I find it too. I think I basically said the point anyways. But anyways, I'm suggesting that the numbers break down in two ways. If you have 310 worlds, there's two ways, the 155, the 155, which I can't remember what the gematrias or those were, but I know you remember, Sean. The Kaneh, 155, the Kaneh. Kaneh Chochmah, Kaneh Bina. They're equal. Chochmah, Bina, two equal forces, they're both important. But I'm telling you, you have this other relationship, which I like to think of, is the Raz versus the Egel, or you need them both together. And the Egel fits in the ashes of the red heifer. Fit in perfectly there. And of course the Egel, which started it all, the golden heifer. The golden heifer. Can everyone ever say that? The golden calf. What's the difference between a calf and a heifer? I wasn't such a big cowboy. You could probably tell. So you have here we're talking about a complete equanimity. Good and bad is equal. You just want to be in the story at least. You have to have, if you had total vacuousness, the mayim and mayim, or the ashes and ashes, you have no life. That's not what we're talking about. Nachum Ish Gazim was in the total diplomacy at the highest levels. He was a James Bond of sorts. Umi she'ein shavim lei. And a person who he marries who above. That's the tagline to the Gemara they do for their own selfish purpose. They love themselves, wanting to cut themselves off from the hand of God. To live a very Gentile mindset of not identifying the one creator. If you're not that, then I don't mean you're. If you totally believe in monotheism, it's not. I don't think that's talking about you. But the foundation of this Gentile outlook is love of self. Therefore, you go back to the beginning to love the physical experience. And his all the resources and all his relationships for his own personal experience. The person like that, it's best that he never been created. We're almost done. The main experience of this world is for the sake of encountering these obstacles, these challenges. To know, to be aware, to make aware that what's in his heart, lest he pursue foreign pursuits, which are founded on the desires of the body, because the bodies divide us into separate, so we become selfish, self-motivated. Which comes from, unto itself, and that comes from the Sitra Achra, the other forces. But the other forces are meant in order for you to overcome them, as we said before in the name of the Kli Yakar, which I did very quickly and very concisely. Shem taivas haguf mishtalshim Sitra Achra bohem hu chafetz, and he wants these things. Lust for the sake of physical pleasure. Or the choice is his, whether he's going to desire true life, which comes from the true God of life. Oh, here it doesn't say the word true here. It says the living God. And then those words they debate whether they're meant to be in parentheses or not. And he should have faith, and in truth he is living in that. Whatever comes out from Elokim Chaim, it's not a random force for his own betterment, but rather a purpose for him to express his own worthiness. So his relationship with the Creator is now acknowledged and affirmed. Every single detail of the experience of his life does not come from the other forces of the world, because Hashem directs the steps of man, as it says in Tehillim Lamazayin Kaf Gimel. Ve'ein mila, nothing comes out of someone's mouth until God anticipated him saying it. Any potential thing that you could utter is already anticipated by God. Hein Hashem yadaita kela, as the verse says, that God knows everything. Ve'im kana kol teiva tachlis, and therefore the fact that he exists, that itself is good. So everything you experience, since it comes all from one bestie, raksha ina muslag, it's good, but you just don't necessarily get it yet. But that's the faith. That's where faith comes in and fills in the gap, and that's the whole. Yes, it's much greater than what we know, than what we don't know, which we have faith on. And this is a very radical statement the Alter Rebbe says here. With this faith, if it's sincere, then everything comes out to be overtly good. This is the key to switching over to see how everything had to be, and it led to your greater development, and now you're actually proud to be who you are today because of those. Now you'll see everything, and retroactively the Rebbe says in another place. Because in this faith that he's explaining how it works metaphysically. With this faith that he believes that, and that he has faith that the ra, the negativity, hanidme, that appears to be negative, begolui, outwardly, every vitality that's granted to that resource or that in the person or thing that is now confronting you, the entire energy for that to happen comes from a good source. That's the Teiv Ha'elyon, the good of above, Sheikh Masli's Barak, which is God's wisdom, as we said before, Shein Masegas, but you just don't understand it. And you know what that is? That's the Aiden, Shalamayla Haba, that's greater than the world to come, is called Aiden itself. Not the garden, it's the Eden itself. And Gan Eden. Gan Eden here, I think, means the spiritual Gan Eden. And therefore, when we're talking about Tchias Meisim, you're going to experience Eden on earth, I think. So this faith causes there to be a synchronization between the purpose and the experience. The experience might be difficult, so therefore, once the meaning of that is identified and acknowledged and appreciated, then it brings out the good that was hidden in it. Okay, I don't do the metaphysics on that. I do it more in terms of your awareness of purpose. But there is metaphysics going on there too. I'm not wearing my metaphysician hat right now. just to figure that out a bit. It sort of puts it in sync with the meaning behind it, and that becomes what you're connecting with now. And it becomes now the story can proceed with that knowledge, so therefore it's revealed good with that former suffering or the current difficult experiences in life, like getting out of your bed if you're 14 or to 25, I think it's the teenage years these days. Okay, so it quotes the end of that Tanya ends with Ayin le rasa l'kim zelasacha. That's Aiden, where no eye has seen it. Sorry, it quotes the Rebbe points out that it stems from this discussion in Brachos. In Lamed Daled 34b, okay, in Gemara Brachos. So I looked that up, and I got the Mea Shalech on this. I think that we have Yael is a fan of the Mea Shalech. It's not the Ibnitzer, right? I think it is. So it says like this in the Gemara. It says, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Kol Nevi'im kulam lo nisnabu ella lebale tshuva. This is the first opinion. Did you know this? Next we're going to say, Plig de Rabbi Abo. He says, Makam Shabala Tshuva Imdim, Tzadikim Gurim Einam Imdim. The place that Baal Tshuva stands, Tzadikim Gurim don't stand. And we have to see what that means. But that's the famous part of this. It's quoted all over Chassidus, and I think in time. So are the Baal Tshuva, look what the first thing. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Kol hanaviim kulam lo nisnabu ela Baal Tshuva. The prophecies were only for this purpose of the Baal Tshuva. But tzadikim murim ayim lo ras elokim zlascha. No eye has seen but God, and what that means. No eye has seen it, God aside from you. So it seems to be saying that Baal Tshuva are inferior in some sense. So therefore, I think that's the context of the Mea Shalech, which we'll get to in a second. I just want to finish the Gemara. And the Gemara notes that this statement disagrees with the opinion of Rebbe Bo, who holds that penitents are superior to the righteous. It's got some embedded commentary here. As Rebbe Bo said, in the place where penitents stand, even the full-fledged righteous do not stand, as it is stated, peace, peace unto him. He quotes the verse. So this is a disagreement about who's greater, tzaddikim or Baal Tshuva, in a sense. That there's different experiences for each. A tzaddik gets ayin le'ra'asa lakim zeloscha. Nobody's seen such greatness. That's prepared for the tzaddikim. The Baal Tshuva, they got themselves sullied in a sense. I think that's the simple way of understanding it. Let's see this Mea Shalech. It says, both of these are not contradictory. They're both, you can resolve as important messages. Because a perfectly righteous person has a body that's purified and cleansed. Baal Tshuva has been sullied. But the soul of Baal Tshuva comes from a higher place. It's hewn from a higher place in the quarry. Quarry? Yeah. Then compared to the souls of the tzaddikim, the Isa B'Zayir HaKadosh, as it says in the Zayir, because in the future, the purposeful bad behavior of the penitent are going to be considered merits. Az yireh Hashem yisparach lenefesh Baal Tshuva. Then Hashem will appear to the soul of the Baal Tshuva, shekaven la'emek amik mikol das sh'adam yuchal hasig. That he will be have intention towards appreciating the depths more so than any das sh'adam yuchal hasig that a person could comprehend. But kol zeh yipal yidei. And all this is accomplished through his crying out in repentance, the efforts for him to stop being an addict to whatever it is. Therefore, the soul of the Baal Tshuva is superior to the soul of the tzaddik. And this is the concept that the olah that we spoke about in the beginning is entirely offered on the altar. It's analogous to the tzaddik gamar, because his whole body is purified. It can all go up to Hashem. But we'll see a difference in where the blood is spring. Where's the chayas? What animated this person? What level did that attain? we'll see that that's different than his body, which is totally pure. So that all of it goes up. Ever wondered why you have to offer a whole sacrifice to God? Isn't that a human being should eat it at least? You're killing something for no reason here. So this represents a type of person who served the world by not being in the world so much. The whole thing becomes a sacrifice to God. Okay, that's what it's embodying, this concept. But the crimson line that we explained earlier, that you have the altar that's divided in two equal halves, the 155, the 155, that breakdown. I think it's equally divided. To indicate that his soul, what was the blood, the highest, the vitality that he used his soul for, did not reach so high. The korban chatas nachal kahanim. Whereas the sacrifice that's a chatas for a sin, you offer a sacrifice for that happens to be eaten by the kahanim, by human beings, not by the altar. Sheba al chait bepeil, because there was an actual sin that was done, that this thing was now the product of. This is the baby that the sin engendered, that if the person wants to get on good terms, he has to take his money, buy a sacrifice, and have the Kohanim feast on it. So it represents something different, that a human being, a Kohen, a priest, is going to eat this rather than the altar. Sheba al chait bepeil, shezeh mevi habal tshuva, v'damai nizrak l'mayla. And to emphasize that this is a greater experience in a way, it's not like God himself is going to consume it, but it's going to be through the mortal embodiment of the Kohanim. So it's a bit more worldly, right? It doesn't go off completely in fire, it doesn't get used by any human being, but rather Kohen eats from the chatas. Shabal chait b'peil shezeh mevi habal tshuva v'damei nizrak l'mayla. Expressed the superiority of this, expressed by the fact that the blood is sprinkled in the upper part of the altar. Hainu shenafshe gadol ma'ed, to indicate that his soul is extremely great. Vezehu machmas shivran libai, because of the fact that he crushed his heart. Vetzakasi, and he cried out. He merits that he should be elevated, his soul be elevated to incline himself towards the will of Hashem. So he is more expressive of fulfillment. Okay, there's another commentary here that I have to find because it really puts this in beautiful light. And I know I have it referenced here. I don't know why I can't find it right now. And you know what? I might not be able to. Maybe it's the Malbim on this verse in Isaiah that it's quoted here. Okay, it's interesting, but not what I was. Oh, 1 second. Oh, I think it's the going weiter on the Kli Yakar. This is the Kli Yakar. I think it's what he explains later, and this might be it. Let's try this. So he quotes the Balakane of the Kli Yakar on the whole idea of the red heifer that we were speaking about earlier. He explains everything to do with this according to the Balakeda, that's speaking about the ways of repentance, as explained in his work. And on this basis, it's easy to see how the healing of the soul is like the healing of the body. Did you know that? I've always been arguing that. The mind-body thing, my mom is very big into that. Here it's the soul-body thing. Ki hamashke hamayel litrufas adam chayla mazdik la'adam bari. Because the concoction, and this fits in with beautifully, he's talking about the paraduma here, but the concoction that is good to heal the body is good for that person's body who's wounded or ill, but it's harmful to a healthy person. This is why you have to have the balance. Okay, this is what I wanted to get to. I'm very happy I found this, Baruch Hashem. The Kamayim Razal, Bar Bei Rav Yasiv Tainisa, Kalaba lichal sherusa. Kalba leichel sherusa. That Rav, the Bar Bei Rav, I think it says except for Rav, who would sit in fasting in a way that a dog would sit to eat, I think it says. I might have got that wrong. Sherusa, I think it means to eat. To eat is... His fasting was like a dog feasting. I don't know for sure if I got that right. But this shows that, this is the Kli Yakar quoting the Bala Kena, I think he said. Fasts impurify the pure. If you fast and you're really pure, you're actually causing yourself harm. Matari matmeim, and it caused purity to the impure. Perish may mishin nitzma kvar ba'avera, meaning that someone who's already contaminated by a sin, someone who's already had a life experience that was harmful, what happens as a result of that? Therefore, he needs to do this. Like it said in Yuma, Pevav Amid Beis, it explains what a Baal Tshuva is. Like someone who has the opportunity to repeat. He's in the hotel with the little bar that they so conveniently provided the alcoholic. They should have special rooms for alcoholics. He's encountered the same thing that he had to in the past break away from. And he has to do it again. According to Rav Yehuda, this has to be in the same time of his life, and the same woman, and in the same place. Wow. Because the environment of the sin and the gateway that he passed through to bring energy into that world, in order for him to overpower that, it's specific. To overcome his inclination towards using that particular thing inappropriately. Shekvar tam peh tamavera, for his mouth has already tasted the taste of sin. Umavakesh lemudai, and he is therefore drawn towards re-educating himself in that again and again. Ha sha'amar heishea beis pasuk aleph. V'hayu l'makam asher yemar lahem loy ami atem yemar lahem b'nei kel chai davka makam achet asher sham yemar lahem. He's darshing the verse there. It says, look it up in Hosea 2:1. I have that actually quoted. Should we just look up the translation for that? Let's see if we can do that. The number of the people of Israel shall be like the sands of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And instead of being told, you are not my people, they shall be called children of the living God. And there's an amazing malbim on that. I don't know if we'll have time to do that. I'm already late. But it goes on to say, based on that verse, that on the place that a person shall say, you are not my nation, atem yeimar lahem b'ni kel chai, you will tell them, my son of the living God, specifically in the place of the sin, that where he tells them, that you're not my nation, but in that place you were told to lop off, in that place still you have to have the conversation in that place, because that's where the repentance lies. And that's when they will tell you, or there they will tell you, you are the son of the living God. So the conversation is important. What is driving a person? Yes, you have to be so empowered that you're in the same place, the same moment, the same time, the same thing, and you still walk away from it. Because it gets complicated. Look at the next one. And I know I'm going overtime today. Because this is where I told you there was an enigma coming. This is what I was talking about. There are those who say that the intent of the Rizal in saying that the place in the Baal Tshuva stand, This is the Gemara Brachos that we said before. Tzadikim murim ein yachol la'amad sham. The tzadikim can't stand there. Ki abal tshuva tzarich lamid makom asher amad sham b'rishayna. Because the Baal Tshuva is in a certain cultural mindset. He's drawn to again and again. He's forced to be back there, I think it's saying. I think that's the resolution. We'll see what becomes my problem with this. But I think it's saying that it's just he's drawn towards it again and again. And he ends up being there. To be joined with that very woman who caused him the problem that he had a sin with. But a tzaddik gamar asur hayichud. For that, a tzaddik is forbidden to be alone like that. Because he's not allowed to bring his soul to come to a challenge. But the other person's already enmeshed with that. He cannot escape it. What if he's married to someone that he shouldn't be married to? What does he do then? It becomes extremely, so here we're saying in a certain sense, you can't help but be in that environment in some way still forevermore. You've made your bed or you were forced into that, and now you are different Metzias. You have a different way of looking at everything, and what's good for one is bad for the other, and bad for the other, good for one. This is a very important share. You guys share this. This is very important, this teaching. I think that this message is absolutely worth being late for a minute for. So this unity that we described before, that's asr to a tzaddik, this yichud, dahainu etzem tshuva, which is the very essence of tshuva, because the person's still going to be in that. Even if he's not there, he's still there in his mind. He's always forced to be there. Because this doesn't seem to go well with the idea Baal Tshuva has to put harachakas on himself and go further away. So I'm interpreting this to say that he's forced culturally in his memory, the things that he's driven by, also still affect him always. He's forced in there. Whether the tzaddik gamar could say, you know what? I don't know it. I don't want to know it. Thank you very much. I'll leave it for the Baal Tshuva. And they don't have to be, a Baal Tshuva who is genuine, looks different than a from earther. This is why. He looks different because he is different. And things that are good for one is not good for the other. It causes the pure people to become impure if you do the etzem hatshuva for the wrong person. You're not supposed to have the etzem of hatshuva being forced into the same experience again and have to overcome it again and again. Because you're basically stuck there for life. If you're brought up, you see the generational effect of parenting. You engender that they're going to parent the same way. That's the way they modeled it. You're stuck in that mindset. There's a reason for this. There's different rules for each. You have to identify this in halacha itself. That's why the halacha of the paraduma express this reality. Isn't that powerful? It's purifying for the impure and impure. If you get it backwards, it has the backwards effect. If you re-encounter things, it's going to be, for the impure, it's going to bring them purity. Metara tmeim. The ken sari kol Baal Tshuva lahates. Now check this out. This becomes confusing. Thus, every Baal Tshuva has to incline himself for the furthest extreme b'davar shechatebay, in the thing that he sinned in. That seems to be the exact opposite. Before we said he's in there, he's stuck there forever. And now we're saying that he has to incline himself away from it for the furthest extreme. B'davar shechatebay, in the thing that he sinned with, in order that in the end, if he just drives himself to the extreme, he's going to end up in the middle. Isn't that cool? Because he's driven so much in one direction. Remember, the Talmud Chacham has this extreme experience. He's got a greater yitzhar than anyone else. So the Baal Tshuva and the chief Rav of the city should have a major connection in the very essence of their character. Tzari Kol Baal Tshuva, and remember, they have to learn Hilchos Avodah Zarah to know what's forbidden. So they're supposed to be more enmeshed. They have to be one with the Baal Tshuva. I've been saying that before. Here's my proof. The Ken Tzari Kol Baal Tshuva lahatais l'ksei achron medavar shechatebay kadesh yetzle derech hamutza. By him doing the extreme, now he's going to come to the middle where he should be. And you have to have some rhythms in your life too. You're going to be too overly from a Baal Tshuva when he starts. He has to do that. He'll get to the place of Mutza, so it exists chronologically here too, I'm suggesting. Kadesh Yetzil Derech HaMamutza, but I'm also saying that his extreme the other way will take him to what's probably right for him. Kederech HaUmnin, because look at the example they give. They give it a craftsman, Hareitzin Liyasher Eitz. He wants to bend wood, and I have this for my guitar That's a beautiful analogy, but I'm not going to get into my guitar now. Ma'ukam shetzarik, if it's bowed, shetzarik la'akmei l'tzad sheni, you have to bow it the other way. Avol l'tzadi gamor, but for a tzadi gamor, is that appropriate? Lo yisakin derek, that he cannot put himself in the environment by choice or not choice. He wants to stay away. El shetzarik le'ilak b'derech memutz tamin. He has to go the straight and even path, even keel, always. He never has this invigorating experience that a Baal Tshuva is forced to experience if he's genuine and honest. Ecclesiastes tells you, the king of all wisdom, don't be such a tzaddik. Al te tzaddik harbe. Al tirasha harbe. Also, don't be such a gangster. The Kenya Shem Shedavar Zen Nirmas Baskalas Eitz Erez. There are those who say that this is alluded to in the fact that you throw this cedar wood, ve'ezav, and the myrtle, I think, el teich sreifa sapara, amidst the burning of the ashes, dahainu as hashlachas haktzavos, because one's tall, the cedar tree is tall, and the bush, the myrtle, or whatever it comes from, the bush, the ezav, is showing a different extreme, the most overly humble. You should not be too much haughty, and don't be too humble. Therefore, the para gets into the conversation of relative purity to teach us that regarding aspects of repentance, there are many things that can, for one person, it could cause impurity, and the other person, purity. Because I could tell certain people they should not rely on a filter in certain circumstances. I would say, just, what are you afraid of? It's probably harmful that a person, it's as if he has some preoccupation with things that he doesn't. He's a mature person. He can buy another phone anytime. It doesn't make sense. So in a certain philosophical way, I don't think it makes sense to have filters. Your mind doesn't have filters. What if you think inappropriate thoughts? What do you think about killing somebody? Is that good? So think something good. If you have an internet, put something good on. You subscribe to whatever you do for a moment. You say that that's the right thing to do. You did it for yourself. Certainly you would think that that's the right thing to do. So are we not in control of ourselves? I think an adult in this respect, should probably not have filters. It's probably in some way bad. And I have a proof from that, from Avram Avinu putting Sari Meno in a casket, sneaking her over the border to Egypt, because the Egyptians were shtufis dima. What, the Canaanim were so great? We say they're the most vile people, but when he was in Canaan, he didn't do that. So Meforshim say he's going now to Eretz Mekuarim, Achei Akushim, whatever it says. There's horrible things about the Egyptians. And Avram went too far. Whatever sneas level was appropriate for the Canaanim should have been the same for the Egyptians. Don't go too far. It got a fascination to it, and then she became kidnapped. Mazel tov. Look what results in being too from. Al te tzadik harbe, says Koheles. And don't be such a gangster also, he has to include. You think I'm telling you to be a gangster? Don't be a gangster. Recognize that there are extremes, and in those extremes there's the wisdom of passion. And that passion is what you're supposed to actually use for the middle path, or what will get you there if you have to go too far the other way. Now you'll end up in the middle path. And when you did, then you'll feel accomplished. Because if you're going to be wacko, probably not the end result as intended. But I think it's very interesting to note that before he says that Baal Tshuva ends up returning to his original, that's the way I interpret it. Maybe we'll look at the words. Oh, it's getting very late. Yesh kama dvarim hatzamim mitarim ke'echad v'shinui ba mitzad hamekablan. So what determines then if something's good for you or bad for you? That's who receives it. Who is you? What life story do you have to have? Is it appropriate to wear a ridiculous shirt with a jerk? It says the word jerk. If I were to buy it, I wouldn't buy this shirt. It was given to me, so I'm a cheapskate. I think it matches nicely with my jeans that also were given to me. They're too tight, and I can barely move. But I wanted to give them a try. Maybe by the end of the day and all the smorgasbord last night is... So here he's saying it depends on the Mekablan. If you're going to receive something, if for you the thing's bad, don't do it. But you can't tell me it's the same medicine for everybody. And this is the correct and clear path, says the Kli Yakar. And wow, with the Kli Yakar today. I see no difference between Chassidus and these things which are called Nigla, or maybe it's Ramez. I love seeing how it's all one Torah at every single level. The halacha, the narrative, the story of the Tanakh, the Meforshim, the Ramez, the things that they learn out, all fit together with the Chassidus and Kabbalah into one smacking glorious package of a good story. Can you imagine a mythology that writes a good story of heroes that are worthy? Look at their lifestyles that Freud had to point it out, Nietzsche points out. How Oedipus and all this Mishigasim. So look at a narrative where it actually brings out true impeccable heroism in the protagonists of the story. There's only one book that actually survives that type of what's it called when accountants in Lo Aleinu? And there's an assessment, but there's a audit. Oh, that's like a 4-letter word. Probably a 5-letter word. Chamishas Lapare, Spirit calling the heron. Okay, so everyone have a great day. I went over time because I really wanted to drive that point, and I found it, which was a miracle because it was not on my screen. That's really cool. And okay, there's one more Malbim I share that I didn't get a chance to, maybe another time. I want to pick up, maybe we could pick up from here because I think this is a very important lesson for our time. Have a great day.